Voss Montenegro, Jason Brody, two names I'm sure you are very familiar with, especially if you've clicked on this video. How about the Rook Islands? How about Skrillex and weed fields and explosions and deep blue waters and vivid green horizons? Far Cry is a staple series for a reason, and that reason is Far Cry 3. With the advent of the game 1 decade ago, I think it's time to revisit and reevaluate Far Cry. In this essay, I'll be asking one question. A question that I think represents the sentiment of the gaming community at large. Has Far Cry lost its identity? Let's go back to the tropical coasts of some unknown location, stare into the eyes of a madman, and let us hang glide, shoot enemies on mounted turrets, and blow shit up. And let's witness the game that started it all. Now there's two ways you can really look at evaluating Far Cry. And I think it's interesting if we do it both ways. So we can look at Far Cry through the lens of the mainstream identity of Far Cry, which was set by Far Cry 3. Then we can also evaluate it through the lens of one game after another and how it's evolved over time. That's pretty self-explanatory, but as far as evaluating it through the lens of Far Cry 3, I think it will help if we create a little bit of a list to describe what we think the Far Cry experience is. So as far as I can tell, this is the Far Cry experience boiled down to its core aspects. Voss. The game simply isn't itself without him. Our first characteristic is a theatrical and over-the-top villain. 2. Jason Brody, a voice protagonist with a strong personality. 3. Naturally strong narrative to go with these strong characters. 4. Of course, memorable side characters. 5. An open world formula consisting of outposts, simple and usually forgettable side missions, collectibles, and towers that reveal the map when climbed. 6. Vehicles to traverse that map. 7. The location must be far away. And 8. The sandbox. A lot of guns, enemies, approaches to each situation. This usually results in emergent gameplay. I'm sure you've heard the term before. And I think a lot of people, myself included, definitely remember these games for that aspect. And finally, 9, a progression system tied to cash, hunting, and a skill tree where you gain skill points over time. Now those are the main things I think stick in our minds when defining Far Cry 3, and subsequently, all of the Far Cry franchise. But there's more in it than that, so here's the rest of the list, which is more granular, but I think it's still important to defining the moment-to-moment gameplay. So you got car chases, run-and-gun combat, stealth, tagging enemies with a camera, lots of weapons to choose from, armor that depletes and needs to be recharged, a healing system of syringes and manual healing, weapon customization, both visually and functionality-wise, so you got suppressors, scopes, extended magazines, those kind of things, a map with map markers on it, the hang glider, the wingsuit, very iconic, and lots of explosions. With all that said and all that in mind, let's analyze the Far Cry series and what it would become, starting with the first game from 2004. So that intro was absolutely bonkers, and I kinda love it. It's equally confusing as it is entertaining. Like, does this guy in a Hawaiian shirt have some sort of, like, prescience? Or who the hell is a lady, and why are there ugly-ass goblin dudes? Anyway, the game starts with us taking control of the guy in a red shirt, and we go through a short tutorial, appreciating the view along the way, and we learn how to crouch and go prone, which is something I only ever used like maybe 2 times, and it's the only time it shows up in the series. You'll also notice the developers knew at least something about history, as there are Japanese ruins littered all throughout the game from the Pacific Theater. You'll also notice there's a stamina system, and another bar to represent how much bullet-resistant vest you have left. Then there's this cutscene that sets the mood quite well for the game.
Listen, dirtbag! Keep an eye out for some punk in a red Hawaiian shirt. If you see him, call me at once. Am I understood?
Yes, sir!
Also, we get to learn our character's name.
Hello? Are you there? Pick up the radio if you can hear this. I know you're there. I've been tracking you since you and Val arrived.
Who are you?
I'm the guy who's going to tell you how to survive. Call me Doyle.
How do I know I can trust you?
Well, for starters, how about the fact that I haven't turned you in? That radio has a bioreader. Since I know you're there, I could have ratted you out already.
Good point. Keep talking.
Listen, you need to get out of there and quickly. I'll help you as much as possible, but you don't have much time. There's an exit that will lead to a small camp. Be careful as you go. This area is crawling with mercenaries.
By the way, name's Jack Carver.
I'll give you some details that aren't made super clear in the game. The lady on the boat is Valerie Constantine, and she is a journalist who hired Jack to take her to these islands. Jack is ex-Special Forces from the US and now does private boat charters in the Pacific. I guess that's a thing. And so he can offer it decent protection and knows his way around, I suppose. After we make first contact with the mercenaries on the island, Doyle instructs us how to use the binoculars. With these we can tag enemies. They're not able to be seen through walls, like in 3, but they do show up on the minimap. You can also hear enemy conversations through them. Some of these are rather funny and, to my dismay, randomized. I unfortunately do not have footage of it because the first time I was recording it, I actually was not recording it. My mistake.
Did you hear that some guy is loose on the island? Some intruder?
Yeah, everyone's talking about it, but I ain't seen no sign of him yet.
That guy better not be stupid enough to come around here, or I'll fix his little red wagon.
You do what?
You heard me. I'll fix his little red wagon.
What are you, like 200 years old? My grandpa talks better trash than that, dude.
Fine, fine. I'll mess him up. I'll kick his ass. I'll tear off his head and drink his fluids. Is that better?
I bring this up because the game doesn't really take itself too seriously, if you couldn't tell that already, at least not narratively. It fully embraces its own wackiness, but it does take itself seriously insofar as being a fun game, and generally I say it succeeds at that. You'll also notice an alarm system in the game. The later games follow an almost identical formula, that is, there's a stick with a little alarm box on it, and some little siren-y type things on the top, and some dude will run up to it and press the button. This will make more mercs show up when it's triggered. Already we're checking off some superficial aspects of the game that fit well with the Far Cry 3 experience. So I make off in a Jeep with a mounted turret and head right to the next objective, an old carrier from World War II. Once in the carrier, Doyle instructs us to make our way to the upper deck and find info on Val. When we do, we are introduced to our villain.
No sign of Val herself, but I found her camera. There's also a file here on some joker named Krieger.
This archipelago is the ideal location for my research. These islands are isolated from international shipping lanes, so I am free to do my work without interference from the outside world. This work will take time, but a measure of the future of mankind depends on the success of my research here. I will not fail my destiny.
Doyle, they're taking Val to somewhere called the Bunker. Where's that?
I know where that is, but it's heavily guarded. Get a boat and I'll meet you.
I'm on my way.
Definitely an over-the-top character, a la James Bond villain. He undoubtedly has one of the weaker first appearances in the series, but I still like it. Then we steal a little boat from the big boat. Wait, do boats have babies? Did I just steal a baby? Huh. Well, then Doyle gives us our next objective.
I've got a boat. Now what?
Our only chance is to disrupt the entire communications grid. That's the only way to cause enough confusion for you to escape completely. To do that, we need to get you to Kabatu. Head east to find it, because you're not going to be able to stop and ask for directions.
When I arrive, I do a little bit of maritime combat before making my way to the shore, then up to where the satellite is. Doyle mentions that it's dangerous to be on the main paths in the jungle.
You're much more likely to encounter resistance on marked paths. If you keep to the jungle, your odds suddenly get a whole lot better.
This is because there is a stealth system in this game, but frankly it's quite bad. I found that crouching doesn't seem to help almost at all, and going prone is painfully slow and still unlikely to offer any good sound dampening. I often found myself being spotted from extremely far away or heard through walls while crouching. It almost feels like the AI is bugged or something, or they just didn't test this, because I have a hard time thinking the developers would intentionally mention stealth through Doyle to the player, but also not make it very good. Also, later in the game, you'll find that even off the beaten path, there's often patrolling enemies anyway. Anyhow, we make our way to the door of the comms center.
We have a slight problem, Jack. Looks like they've locked down the door to the comm center.
That's not good. What the hell do we do now?
It's risky, but I should be able to bypass the security lock from here. Stand by.
Stand by, he says. That's right.
This is a good time to mention the very stark difficulty spikes this game has. It's already pretty difficult, as that was kind of the MO back then, but oh boy, do they just kick it up sometimes. I'd be lying if I said it didn't get frustrating at times, and not really in the fun way. I actually played this game on easy, because when I first bought it about 5 years ago, I only made it to level 15 or 16, and I was playing on normal mode and just kept getting my ass kicked. Now, I normally play the hardest mode in games that aren't like permadeath or whatever, but this game, nah, I don't have the patience. Far Cry concerns itself with being hard first and fair second. Games are inherently unfair, of course, but there's a fun and a not fun way of doing it. Far Cry typically does it in the not fun way. Like later on we meet those weird goblin things you saw in the intro, and you'll actually just get one shot by those with almost full armor and health, and that's on easy mode. I personally prefer hard games. I feel like I have power to control my death via skill, or just getting good, as the kids say. But Far Cry seems more like the old school hard, where getting good is banging your head against it until you know where every single enemy placement is and how to approach it perfectly to not get instantly wrecked. This playstyle is not my personal favorite. I much prefer something like Elden Ring or Sekiro, where learning the game flow is more important than just knowing how to perfectly walk into a situation and not get instantly neutered. It's also worth noting I am bad at games though, so maybe I'm just bad and I suck and this whole point is null. It did take me over 100 attempts to defeat Genichiro in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, to put that into perspective. I wish I had a recording of me killing him because I was whooping and hollering like an idiot for several minutes after. The reason I bring this up is because this is the first noticeable difficulty spike that kind of annoyed me. The top of the aircraft carrier was brutal, but that felt kind of fair. This one, however, just kind of annoyed me. The game spawns some sort of a mortar shooting boat down on the shore that I have tried several times to destroy throughout my playthroughs, to no avail. This time I tried sniping the driver. Then it spawns 2 helicopters. You have to hide and cover and peek for just a split second while you hit them with rockets. This is where the clunkiness plays a role in my annoyance. The rocket launcher is weighed down by how hard it is to properly aim, because it has a slow projectile, and even at close targets this becomes difficult. Add on that the helicopters are rather sporadic in their movement. Finally, there's a lack of rocket launcher ammo in this fight, and it all adds up to just kind of feeling like a roll of the dice if you get rid of the helicopters or not. Because if you don't, these assholes just shred your health and you have no chance of running to the door. The helicopters also drop enemies above you as you hide, which means you're more or less on a timer to peek the helicopters before you start getting flanked. The silver lining of the helicopters is that if you know where to shoot, you can easily kill the gunner inside of them. But ultimately, the frustration of these sections isn't how hard or easy the enemies are to kill, it's more the way that you feel like your first attempt is doomed to fail while you learn where the enemies will spawn and where to place yourself. It ends up just feeling like knowing how to abuse the helicopter's AI is the intended experience, rather than being able to handle a situation with your superior gamer mind when it arises the first time. I'll touch on difficulty spikes later in the game though. After a few attempts, I made it through, of course. Once inside, we get more insight on Krieger's monkey hybrid things.
Anticipated. The test subjects are demonstrating superhuman qualities, but are somewhat unstable. I am concerned they may become difficult to control. I have taken the precaution of using my own DNA as a carrier for the strain. Perhaps this will give them some primordial instinct linking them to me. Then I should be able to control them. The next test subjects will be ready for incubation soon.
Then we do a big boom and my monkey brain gets a dopamine rush because big boom equals big cool. It's really that simple. Right after this, we find ourselves a series staple, the hang glider. This was quite fun and sadly underutilized in the rest of the game. This is actually probably the longest glide you can actually do in the campaign, and unlike later games, you actually use all of your weapons while gliding, which I think is a nice little touch. This little joyride also does a pretty good job of showing off just how good the game still looks. Despite being almost 2 decades old, the foliage is still dense and beautiful. The water can even look charming in certain moments. This was definitely a looker back in the day. With a bit more legwork after this, we made Doyle for a very awkward cutscene.
You must be Jack.
How did you know that?
I've been expecting you. They've moved the girl. Get in. Get under there. If they see you, we're both dead.
Who's gonna see us?
You don't want to know. I'll be in touch.
Doyle leaves us off at our next location. We make our way into some caves, and this is where we see Krieger's specimens a little bit closer. In a completely unexpected turn of events, the Trigen, as they're called, have escaped and started to wreak havoc on the island.
This place is total chaos.
I suspect by destroying the comm center, you caused mayhem throughout all the islands. The Trigens must have taken this opportunity to escape. Fascinating.
I guess the Trigen have some specific power that forces their victims to T-pose. This game doesn't seem to be saying much at the end of the day, but if I had to guess, it's trying to say something about playing God and the hubris it takes to do such a thing. And this is the first sign of how bad of an idea that is. Don't fuck with nature, as they say. We also get a good up close at one of the Trigen. Next up, we see the enclosure for the Trigen. We can see just how bad this escape is turning out to be. Dozens of soldiers are getting turned into jelly all around us. This section is quite fun, because you really can just watch the soldiers and Trigen duke it out. In my 6 or so playthroughs, I've seen the soldiers lose almost all the time, but occasionally they seem to be lucky and survive. Either way, it doesn't really matter to us, because whoever is left will still be our enemy at the end of the day. After a nice little battle with the Mercs and the Trigen, we get ourselves into the bunker where Valerie is supposedly located. But in another completely expected turn of events, Valerie is being taken somewhere else. Then we're treated to this cutscene, which is probably my favorite cutscene in the game.
Pilot's dead. Jump! Valerie Constantine, CIA. I'm here on assignment.
You could have mentioned that back in port. How did I get so lucky?
None of the other beach bombs had special forces training.
You had me checked out?
Company policy.
Then you know I'm a bit out of practice.
It's just like riding a bike.
I'm listening.
CIA has an undercover operative on this island. We lost contact almost 10 weeks ago.
Jack, are you there?
Doyle?
Mission accomplished.
Doyle, it's Val. Where are you?
We'll catch up later. You've got to keep moving. Go inland a few hundred yards and you'll find cages holding untrained Trigens. You've got to release them. That should keep the security forces off your back for a while.
Copy that.
Untrained Trigens? You mean some of them are trained?
Come on. Help me and I can help you. And the first thing you can do to help is take out that regulator.
Right, I'll do it, but I want to know what's going on here.
We'll meet at Krieger's main archives after you destroy the regulator.
The spy thriller and James Bond vibes are definitely strong with this one. Also, in typical game fashion, Valerie just teleports away behind us. Good for her. Did the devs just not expect people to turn around? I mean, maybe they do, but eh? I also couldn't help but to look at the moon-shrouded water. There's a particular charm to water in old games. I don't know what it is. There's just something about the water mesh having a room temperature amount of polygons that just kinda soothes me, I guess. Now I want to talk about the linear aspect of this game. As we all know, Far Cry is an open world franchise, starting with the second game. But the first game is a pretty typical linear story driven shooter. That doesn't mean you'll be funneled down what is effectively a corridor to kill enemies though. The level design actually holds up remarkably well. The levels are wide open and only funnel you places at certain moments. This means there's always an approach suited to your playstyle. In this level, you'll see me using a sniper rifle to make short work of the enemies at this facility. Other players can just charge in there Rambo style. There's also vehicles with mounted turrets in most sections, including this one, so you can just kind of ride in there like your Mad Max. And this level isn't even the best of it. The game gets even better later on. The level designers knew what they were doing. So besides a few questionable decisions here and there, I'd say it translates pretty well into what a modern audience might expect from a game. I also want to briefly bring up the stamina system that I mentioned earlier on. Frankly, it almost feels useless. Basically, it limits your ability to run and jump. It also depletes fairly quickly, which is fine. The problem is that it slowly recharges. This means you can sprint to cover quickly, only to be stuck in that cover for a long time if you wish to sprint again. This would be fine if it weren't for the fact that the gameplay doesn't necessitate that kind of a playstyle. This isn't a Gears of War or the Division style cover-based shooter. The enemies will flank you, throw grenades, absolutely bombard you with rockets, and converge very quickly on your location. It never makes sense to sit in one spot for too long, like at all, even for a few seconds. The end result of these systems clashing together is that I was almost always out of stamina during the game, which means I usually kind of ran pretty slowly. Not exactly fun. It almost makes me wonder if this unbalanced mechanic was some part of a broader stealth system that got diminished in scope, or just not properly playtested. Because if the player could crouch or crawl around with silent weapons, you'd find the stamina system could be a useful tool as a game designer to facilitate that playstyle. By discouraging running as a whole and allowing short sprints instead, with a short, slowly recharging stamina bar, these systems would encourage a slower, more stealthy approach. As it is now though, as mentioned earlier, stealth just isn't a thing in this game. I mean hell, the only silent weapon in the game is the MP5, which has a suppressor on it. My hypothesis of there being an underbaked stealth system seems partially supported by the way the minimap shows wave sounds in the environment. I found this to be a mostly useless mechanic as well, because most of the time if there's noise to be paid attention to, it's also pretty easy to notice without the compass because, you know, it's like some asshole shooting at you or something. Next up, for the first and only time of this game, we see another series staple, the zip line. And for some reason it just moves like really fast. Like I didn't edit that, it just does that, and I think it's fucking hilarious. A little while later, we're at the regulator control panels, and Jack blows it up because he is very fond of explosions in case you haven't noticed.
Great work, Jack. Main tower is down. I'm moving into the archive. When I come out, I'll be using one of the ventilation shafts. It should be easy for me to find you on my way out. Stay in the shaft, keep your head down, and wait for me there.
Finally, a suggestion I can agree with. I'm real good at staying put and waiting.
And finally, we make our escape from the facility, only to get an absolutely fucking crazy cutscene that I love a ton.
I'm moving out now, Doyle. See you and Val on the outside.
I mentioned funny conversations earlier, so here's another one that's a little bit funny to me.
Where you been?
We got a call. Someone's here.
Did you see anything?
No, not yet. But the nerds did.
Fat boys are just squeakers.
They don't know. But it looks like a major outbreak. It looks like the whole island is screwed.
Cripes. If they don't know, who does?
Not me. If you ask me, they're jumping at shadows. They heard about that stranger, and now every time a twig snaps, they think somebody's gonna try and kill him.
God, that's all we need. On call to a bunch of university pukes scared of their own shadows.
Well, maybe after they've stopped shooting.
They're armed now?
Security measures. All personnel have to be armed until the threat is over.
Shit! They'll be all over each other every time someone drops a soda can.
Yep. I don't know what I'm more scared of. The Trigens or nerds with guns.
At this point in the game, there's a full-scale war happening on the surface, and once we get outside we can witness just how advanced the Trigen have become. We see them with rocket launchers and guns, and even just the little stupid ones running around. This is also one of those places where it's just kind of fun to sit back and watch the humans and the Trigen just kind of fight each other, and then you go in and mop up what's left. And then we have the obligatory driving sequence that every action game had to have back in the 2000s. But I have to say, it actually is quite fun, because the driving does feel pretty good. Okay, this is where I bring up difficulty spikes again, because this section is swarming with enemies, both human and Trigen. You have helicopter gunners, you have giant rocket launcher wielding Trigen who have a fuck ton of health, you have a rocket launcher sniper, you have a human gunner, you have a bridge you have to cross with like 3 enemies on it, and then as the battle goes on, multiple cars and other Trigen show up. It actually is a total clusterfuck, and it's extremely difficult to not have like 5 or 6 of them just all target you at once. This part's definitely one of the sections of the game I have to redo a bunch of times because it's almost just luck. And this goes back to what I said about the difficulty sometimes feeling like a roll of the dice, because the only way you really win in this area is to not be spotted by the AI. You're basically relying on the AI just not spotting you, which to me feels pretty cheap. Then this clip you're seeing on screen right now also illustrates a really big issue I have with the enemies in this game, which is that they'll see you from like half a kilometer away. You can see that guy is shooting rockets from so far away, and this happens several times throughout the game, and you're basically hopeless to do anything about it. Not to mention that he's basically rapid firing the goddamn things. Ultimately, what happens in this section is you hang around, hanging back, and hoping that they all kill each other while trying to roll the dice on not getting spotted, and then again you mop up what's left. Now it's cool to like watch them fight it out and whatnot, but once I'm done, I'm not really satisfied. I'm just more relieved I don't have to keep doing it over and over again, because it didn't really feel like it was me that was defeating a difficult situation, and more just the game happening to be nice to me this particular time. Well, after a bit more fighting, we finally get to our destination.
Val should be somewhere in this complex.
Yeah, but there's not much left of this place.
Then you don't have a lot to search, do you? That complex is where they stored a bunch of old test subjects. If one of those things finds Val before you do, she's dead.
Right, I'm moving.
And then about another hour of gameplay goes by where I fight a lot of things, and there's a few difficulty spikes, a few bad level design moments, but for the most part things are pretty much exactly the same as they've always been, and then we finally find Valerie.
There's some bad news. I've been trying to call in help from outside to get us out of here, but there's a problem.
What's up, Harland?
Krieger has set up an electromagnetic field which is blocking any external transmissions. We're being jammed.
We're gonna have to take that out.
I'll pick you up real soon. I should be able to get you to the source of the field. There's a secondary exit in that room, and I'm in a cruiser right outside.
That'll also put us near Krieger's main compound. Maybe I can take a look around and see what we can do to shut it down.
Do whatever you want, but as soon as we get a signal out, I'm done. I'm not even getting paid for this crap.
Okay, I'll leave you here and take Val to Pagao, where Krieger's main laboratory is. I've placed the objectives on your radar, so you should know where to go. By the way...
It was you bastard! I'm gonna find you, rip your throat out. I know where you are, and I'm on my way there now.
Jack, switch to the new frequency now.
Now you've done it, Doyle. Your friend sounds like he's pretty pissed.
Damn it, he knows I'm in on it, and he can track us with my LSI. We've got to hurry.
This next area is where the level design really hits its full stride. You have multiple islands that you can approach in multiple different ways. Each one has multiple ways to get to the objective on them, and there's boats everywhere to accomplish this with. Unfortunately, again, we run into another pretty bad difficulty spike. I won't dwell on this one for too long, but basically it's the rocket launcher problem again, where they're on a really high location and they're shooting down at you non-stop. It does get really obnoxious because you almost have no recourse against them until you actually get right up in their face. Well, after getting through all of that, we finally get our first real boss fight of the game. This is Crow. He's the weirdo with the cowboy hat you've seen around. I will definitely say that no one remembers Far Cry for the boss fights. This fight is extraordinarily boring. Crow is just in a helicopter and all you have to do is stand in a doorway and shoot him a few times with the rocket launcher.
He jumped. He swimming from Pagal.
What are you waiting for? Take him out!
I'm coming for you first, Jack. He's sharp food. I'm sorry, Jack. We need some critical information kept on a PDA my colleague Dr. Anderson had with him. Fortunately, I know where he died. I'll lead you to the area where he was reported missing and help you find it by using the tracking system. Then I'll need you to upload it to my associates. I'll tell you when and how to do that once you've got the... Val is operating near this location as well. I've got no reports of anyone spotting her, so she must still be safe. Don't worry about her. Worry about yourself.
Right, got it.
Soon after that, we find ourselves fighting in some sort of ancient temple ruin type thing. And if you played Far Cry 3, this probably looks familiar to you, and I have a feeling Far Cry 3 definitely just sorta ripped it off from this game. Sometime after escaping the ruins, we have a showdown with Crow and all of his little mercenary friends in the jungle. Of course, we're the player, so we win.
Cole! Come in, Cole! What the devil's going on there? Report! Report!
So you're the famous Dr. Krieger.
Who is this? Who am I talking to?
You'll find out soon enough.
You failed!
Jack! Bingo. This is the location of the facility where they manufacture the mutagen. It even looks like he has an arming sequence for a tactical nuke in case they had to cover their tracks. Thanks, Crow. You just made this real easy.
Oh yeah, I'm sure this is going to be a lead pipe cinch.
Just keep your eyes on the jungle, Jack.
Now that we've got some time to chat, you can fill me in on a few details.
Krieger was a top researcher at the Defense Department, specialized in genetics, protocols for human combat enhancement.
The Trigens.
Right.
Where does the CIA fit in?
Army intelligence busted Krieger for unapproved human testing. He went private sector. So we sent Doyle in as a lab assistant to keep tabs on his work.
So are we here to stop Krieger or save Doyle?
I'm here to keep those creatures from getting off this island. I brought you along because I might just need your help.
So I'm just along for the ride?
Good boy. Doyle mentioned a mercenary base in this area. Let's pay them a visit.
Jack, Val, I've received a go from the office. They've assessed the situation, and they need you to take out the main compound.
I think there are two sites we need to worry about. An outpost and the main compound itself. If we want to make sure we take both out, we're gonna need to get the nuke.
The nuke? Are you crazy?
Oh, relax. It's got a very small yield. Just enough to destroy the facility without too much collateral damage. Besides, we'll be out of range and upwind by the time it goes off.
Somehow this plan seems pretty appropriate for a CIA agent. I don't know why. Anyway, after that we check off yet another staple of action games from the 2000s, which is an escort mission and a defense section. We also get this weirdly sensual cutscene where Jack and Val make themselves immune to the mutagen that would turn them into Trigen.
Doyle, we're inside the lab.
Okay, antidote time. Look for a red case with a biohazard symbol.
What?
I don't like shots.
I'm sure you'll make a lovely mutant.
Inject the serum into your neck.
I've had worse. Let's move.
Then the nuke goes off and somehow doesn't kill everybody in the immediate vicinity.
Jack! Take a look into the future! Nature has failed mankind! Mere humans like you are about to be obsolete! I've only taken a few thousand years of evolution and put it into a test tube. Survival of the fittest! Good luck!
Thanks.
And unfortunately again we get one of the worst difficulty spikes in the game, which is the section where you only get 10 bullets and it's not even enough to really kill anything, and you have to sneak past a bunch of Trigen, And like I said, stealth isn't really a thing in this game, so it was quite frustrating and just a lot of trial and error. Well, after the little expedition in the jungle, we finally get in contact with Doyle, and something pretty bad happens.
Doyle, my armor's turning green.
Sounds like you caught the bug.
I thought I took the antidote.
The antidote should have been able to handle it, but a containment leak could have saturated the air with mutagen. That's what happened to Krieger.
Krieger's infected?
He developed an agent to keep it from spreading. He's still on the treatment. I'm sure he's got it with him.
I'll see if I can talk him into a sample.
Ask nicely. I wouldn't say he's completely human.
The next section is probably the most aesthetically cool section. I mean, it's a volcano with a bunch of people fighting weird alien-looking things. You can't get much cooler than that. Then we have the second boss fight of the game, which was laughably short on easy mode. Then we get some rather odd characterization for Dr. Krieger. Like, he doesn't come off as comically evil in this scene, and I'm not really sure what's up with that, because in the helicopter, he was pretty comically evil.
You alright?
Do I look all right?
I wouldn't worry about it, my dear. You won't live long enough to see what happens next.
Where's the antidote?
Who infected you?
We entered a toxic area.
The mutagen can only be administered through subdermal injection. I wish I could take credit, but I had no time to prepare the serum. Oh, you should turn out to be a beautiful specimen. Give it another hour. Much less for her.
The old man was always one for melodrama. Too bad he had no head for business.
Doyle, you wouldn't.
Of course I would. Working for the government taught me that where there's a weapon, there's money to be made.
Why didn't you just kill Krieger yourself?
The Trigens are fiercely loyal, and you just killed their father. I'd love to see how they take the news, but I've got a super mutagen to sell.
And then finally, after fighting our way to Doyle through the volcano, we get the final cutscene that leaves a lot more questions than answers.
He sent me. They're always watching. You can't change this. You can't change the future.
Probably not, but I can make sure you're not a part of it. Stupid bastard.
With the story all wrapped up, it's time to talk a bit about what made Far Cry 2004 what it was, and if it fits the Far Cry 3 identity, even though it came out before it. It's weird, I know. One could arguably reason that since this is the first Far Cry, all subsequent games aren't truly Far Cry, given just how different they really are. I'm not interested in that tiresome argument though. Far Cry 2004 superficially seems similar to the mainstream identity of the series. It has open-ended gameplay, a focus on story, fast-paced explosive combat, a strongly defined protagonist, a wacky and over-the-top villain, well-defined side characters, lots of weapons, graphics that push the limit of their times, an alarm system, binoculars, depleting armor, a faraway and unknown location, mounted turrets, helicopter enemies, plentiful vehicles for the player, hang gliders, even a singular zipline, and lots of explosions, of course. But the thing that really separates it from its predecessors is that ultimately it's a linear experience. It had no side quests or collectibles, no radio towers or skill trees, no weapon customization, and definitely no animals attacking people and jeeps. I think people are likely to look back at Far Cry 2004 and see it as a completely different game. But I'd argue the DNA was always there. It was just nascent and ready to be picked up by some ambitious company and turned into a blockbuster. If you want a quick review, I'd recommend this game. If you watched this far and it seems interesting, go ahead and pick it up. The game really is a joy in so many ways, despite its various flaws. It really isn't like anything I've ever played, and that's really worth something. I also want to shout out the music. The Far Cry series has always had striking music to me, and the game that started the whole series is no different. The mashup of styles and instruments is simply brilliant. Another thing to consider about Far Cry 2004 is that there are multiple versions. I have elected to review the PC version because to me it's a superior version. The Xbox version was stripped back to be able to run on that console. Additionally, they changed names, story, and gameplay. Plus, there were several other versions and a mini-sequel. The wiki page tells you all you really need to know if you're interested. I will not be covering those other versions. The next episode is Far Cry 2. I'd also like to address something of an elephant. I clearly love all of the Far Cries, and don't worry, I'm ashamed of myself. But by no means do I love the company. I will not be discussing the semi-recent drama surrounding Ubisoft, as it all falls a little bit outside of the scope of this video, and there's probably better people to talk about it than me anyway. But let's also remember that most people are good, and that means that most people in the company are good. The vast majority of the people who work on these are decent people with immense talent and a passion for the art of video games. This essay is something of a love letter to those people, to recognize the artistry and the passion of the developers who pour themselves into these games. The suits and ties can go choke for all I care though. And before I close this video, I'd like to come around to what Far Cry 2004 was trying to say. After writing this script and editing it all together, I think I know the moral of the story. Dr. Krieger's story is a tragic tale of hubris. He is a man who believes he alone can progress mankind past its limits, and past what nature would otherwise permit. He states a commonly misquoted phrase, survival of the fittest. This term actually refers to specific traits, not people. So for example, the trait of having a frontal lobe is more fit than having, let's say, a third arm. And that's why we have very well developed frontal lobes and only 2 arms. Fitness, in the evolutionary term, does not refer to any individual of the population, just genetic traits and their long-term tendency to become fit for the environment, elsewise they disappear. This is a common mistake, one Dr. Krieger has clearly misunderstood. To believe that people can make themselves superior, whether it is by turning them into superhuman ape hybrids or by genocide, it's nothing more than a sick fantasy. No individual has the right to decide who is fit or not. No individual decides who lives and who dies. No individual decides the fate of future generations. Instead, we as a community need to look out for our peers and support each other. People like Dr. Krieger exist right now, and have existed for a long time. You already know their names. It is not up to anybody to decide the worthwhileness of another human being. And don't let anybody tell you that you are not worthwhile and that you are not strong enough. That is for nobody to decide. Thanks for watching. For the 3rd time, thanks for watching. And thanks for making it this far. I honestly don't really expect anyone to make this far because I kind of guess only maybe 100 or 200 people watch this video, and given the retention rate that YouTube videos usually have, especially after like an ending sequence rolls, I don't expect anybody to get here. But I just want to say thanks for a 3rd time. This has been a really great passion project for me, and I'm really proud of myself for what I got accomplished this time. I have made heavily edited videos before, but they were like 4 or 5 minutes long, just like TF2 compilations and stuff. But I've never really made an essay, and it's something I've always really wanted to do, and it's something I didn't realize anybody really wanted other than me until I kind of saw the views that a 20-hour Skyrim analysis gets. That's insane to me. It makes me realize people want it, and I want to create it. So, here I am. If you enjoy it, I'm glad, and I'm thankful for you. I hope you have a good one, and before you leave, I'm going to ask you to leave a comment of a quote that you would like to share with me. Any kind of a quote, whether it's funny or it's profound, it's deep, it's sad, from a book, a movie, a game, a comic book, some random internet comment, or your parents, or whatever. Anywhere that you found a quote that you like and you want to share with somebody, put it in the comments. I'm going to put mine up on the screen. This is definitely one that I've found to be quite impactful.